Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Bob's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on the Jeepster. This car has had the entire braking system replaced. That's how I got it. Everything except the backing plate. I had to do one little repair. Took a look at the brakes when I got it. When I first got it, noticed that there was a part missing. I had there's a little spacer in the top of the shoes on one of the corners that keeps the top of the shoes apart. That was missing. Other than that, everything worked fine. Recently though, I stuck on the brakes hard. Ever since then, the pedal has been fading. Just sit at an intersection with the brakes on, and the pedal will go to the floor. So in this video, we're going to be going through the brakes and trying to figure out what's causing that and making some repairs. And thanks for watching. So I hit the brakes real hard. Brakes have been working fine before, but after I did that, stepped on the brake. Everything works fine, and there it goes, slowly down. So I pump them up and it's fine, right down to the floor. Now it's not doing anything at all. But what was happening is I was at a stoplight and I just set my foot in the brake, and all of a sudden it just started dropping down. I started up for a second. Hard as a rock now, and it's holding there. So it's not the air in the line, because everything was working fine. All this happened as soon as I stepped on the. All this happened as soon as I hit the brakes real hard. There it goes again, right down to the floor. So it's been getting worse, and something has to be done. So I've had no problem with this brake on this car at all. The only issues I had were it's got a real hard pedal. It takes a fair bit of effort. The car had been sitting for about it was rebuilt, I think, around the 2005 time frame, but never completed. It was sort of a partial restoration that was done, and I guess something must have happened, so it became part of an estate sale. At least that's what the previous owner told me. So again, big hard, really hard pedal, but everything fine until I hit the brakes real hard, and then I had a problem. So that tells me, in the fact I can pump it back up, and it's intermittent. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It's the master cylinder. So when I start looking at replacements, I've also noticed something. This doesn't look like the appropriate master cylinder for this car. When I started looking into this, I noticed that there was a lot of different selections for the master cylinder. So this is the one that's recommended for a drum on the front and a drum on the back. This wider one seems to be when you've done a front disc brake conversion. Well, as much as I probably should do a front disc brake conversion, I like this car because it's so original, and I just make sure there's a whole lot of space in front of me. So this much smaller, which makes sense, and this is a 1-inch bore. This is either a 1 1/8 or 1 1/4, at least by the shape of it and what's available for this. So I think that's probably a part of why I have a high brake effort as well. The bigger piston is going to take more force to apply to the wheel cylinder, versus this one, which is a smaller cylinder. I'll have more travel in the pedal, but I'll get more braking force applied. So I'm going to go through this and priming it. That's basically you flush all the air out, and I brought the flushing kit. First of all, I'm going to paint it, and I apologize for that. It's one of these anal things. I cannot stand when the master cylinder gets corroded. I got to find what paint I used in this. This held up fairly well, but I'm going to clean it up. It's a little bit of a shame I won't get the coating on this, but that's okay. We'll at least cover it in a little bit of a light film so it doesn't oxidize too much. So I'm just going to go through the different steps on that as well. But first up, I'm just going to paint it up just to protect it from getting too rusty. So a couple more things. This is this master cylinder is remanufactured from Jeepster. Just went with a name brand. I went to a lot of different websites that specialized in Jeepster parts. That's why I got to see the differences, at least in physical sizes, between the factory one and the the one that's on the car right now. And the biggest thing you saw was that the at the very bottom you've got this fitting here. That's for the warning light for the brake. So if you take a look over in the car, you'll see that's on the side. So, and you can see the width of the body here. And plumbing, which I'm going to have a bit of a problem with, because you can see it's on the opposite side, so I'll probably have to rebend those. This is all on one side here, and then it's two on that side, so I'll have to work that out. So you can see the difference between the two, quite a bit of difference in size. So this fitting won't be a problem. That is for the indication, which is supposed to be in the bottom, not a problem. The brake line is going to be a problem. So that I'm going to have to reroute to get that over. Too long. I might be able to change the bend of it, probably just wind up having to replace it. But first, I'm going to get it painted up and then get it primed. It's really important to do that, but it's got to be painted first. So I thought I'd check a few things. Just thought I'd go and check the make sure the bolting is exactly the same. Got a little wondering just how far off this is, because it could have been sold as a pair, the booster and the master cylinder, but the bolt spacing is exactly the same. So I'm going to take a little bit of a gamble and assume that these can go back together. And just notice way down there, you probably can't see, but there's a fitting, bulkhead fitting, a connector union, I guess. So that I can use to disconnect and then replace this line or rebend it. Interesting thing is I just popped the cap off to take a look inside, and I don't know if you can see in the light here, but you can see in the cover the back is very contaminated, so I'm going to have to flush that out as well. See what the reason for that is. The front are in very good shape. That could be also the O-rings in the master coming apart. We'll find out more. Okay, so I decided to get this out of the way quickly, just give me more room so I can start routing the brake lines around. Picked up or got from a previous master cylinder replacement. These are for the bleeding of the master cylinder. Just going to use them to plug up the holes so the master cylinder doesn't leak too badly. Lots of rags, of course. Let's see how it goes. So that's already interesting that this side has got a different sized fitting than the other. So I'm going to likely wind up having to replace a fitting there as well. Either the front and the back. Not great, but not a surprise either. I saw that basically you had sizes on here and plugs on this side. Should have probably guessed there would have been two different size fittings. Looks like I'm not going to need to plug off the line, not leaking too bad. Yeah, definitely this back cylinder is, or back reservoir is a different size. So that's going to be a problem. So this was kind of interesting. Just drained the fluid to start taking off the fitting or the pressure sensor from this side, and I drained it, and there is some major sludge issues going on. And that would have been the rear brakes. That's a bit of a surprise. So that could be the seal giving way in the back. We'll find out more. But one way or the other, I was trying to avoid having to bleed the brakes, but I don't want that stuff contaminating the rest of the brake lines. So this was the plunger I made up to replace the other one, 1 1/8 long, countersunk it like the other. I actually had to start with a 1/2-inch diameter rod and sort of grind it down a little bit to get it to fit. So it turned out pretty good. Checked the dimensions between the mounting surfaces and everything looks the same, so it looks good. So this is what I wound up with. Made a little plunger up. Checked the dimensions relative to the mating surface to get the right length. So I just got to reassemble it, and I am ready to go. Okay, rebent the brake line. Probably can't see it too well in there, but it follows up along the firewall like it did before. Brought it across here and up. Haven't finished it yet though, because this fitting unfortunately is one size larger because of the other master cylinder had 2 different port sizes. So that one's all correct, no problem there. 3/16 and then a 5/16, whereas this one's a 3/16 by 3/8. So Sunday everything's closed, can't do anything there, so I'm going to finish off by bench bleeding the master cylinder, bolted it all in place, and I'll bring it all back when I've got the other fitting then. Well guys, that's where we're going to have to leave it today. That one fitting's missing. That's in itself a little bit of a strange thing. So that's a 1/2-inch 20 thread fitting, but with a 3/16, so it's a real small tube. So I'm going to have to go to automotive shops and pick up that fitting and finish the last, that's the rear brake line, and put on the flare for it as well. The rest of the tube, it's all bled now. Just waiting for the last part, so I'll bring it back when I've got that last fitting and make the last connection. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that all right. Maybe that helps a little bit. So you saw the sludge in the 1/2 of the master cylinder, so I got to flush the lines out. I noticed quite a bit of material up here, like an oily film, but it's like tar. So I think that's from a previous leaking oil seal, but I'm going to have to check that next. So single-handed bleeding. So I'm going to be using my bleeding tool. Vacuum pump draws off the fluid from the master cylinder. Trick here is to make sure you don't take too much at a time. I'm going to wait for the cup to get start drawing clear fluid, and I know I've got the line clean. First step is to get this bleeder. You can see this is all new brake system. This car, all the brakes are done by the 15 years ago. The car sat for 10 years, and then got only put a few miles on it, and then I put on 4,000 miles on it, but everything's still pretty new. So just loosen that a bit, and again I use the socket just to make sure you get a good start. Don't round on the heads. I've had to deal with that forever. I'm going to get my bolt ready, and a little 1/4 inch. Oh, not going to fit, so that's not going to matter. I'm going to put my bleeder feed, my bleeder connection over top. I should say my vacuum hose over top the bleeder fitting. This is really more of an issue trying to get the wrench around the fitting. This is going to be a little bit tricky from that perspective. And then I just start drawing in a vacuum until I start pulling out that fluid. Now it's coming clear already, so that's a good news story. That just might mean the contamination is pretty much just in the master cylinder, which makes sense. That's probably why. Oh, that's a little bit dirty. That probably makes explains why the master cylinder was giving me the problems. It was the seal that was basically getting gummed up. So I'm going to let that drain a little bit more. I think I'm going to have to go on back and top off the line a bit. So it's just the rear side. I'm not getting anything, so I think I'm going to release the vacuum, and I'm going to go and check on the master cylinder. It might just be air in the line, but I'll check. Okay, the reservoir in the master cylinder was down 3/4 of the way, so good timing. I'm going to draw a bit more. At least I know now that that much is how much I want to go down before I clear it out. Still looking pretty dark here. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop, release the vacuum, empty that little reservoir, start with fresh to see that it's getting clear. So that's what's in the hose now is clear. So I'm going to do just a teeny bit more. Again, I don't think I've got any air in the line now. Looks like it's gone through the whole system, but I'm going to, like I said, do it just a bit. This is a tough one to do. Just got it cracked a little bit. Got a little bit harder not being able to hold a wrench on there at the same time. Gonna just draw just a little bit more off. And I've seen bubbles, typically that'd be a bad sign, but with this the air is actually coming from the hose. So right now all I'm doing is drawing air in through the leaking hose. I'm going to try to loosen this just a tad. There. So that's all that is. It was pulling it from the hose around the bleeder valve. There you go. So I'm going to tighten that up because I think that's good. And I'm going to switch to the other side. Do the same thing. And I work from the closest to the master cylinder away. Okay, same thing on this side. Loosen the bleeder socket so I don't round it. Even though, like I said, everything here is pretty good. And that came loosened nicely. Haven't really figured out what caused that seal on the rear part of the master cylinder to do what it did. And just the one side, it almost seems like contamination, but I don't know. It happened after, like I said, I applied the brakes hard, but it was a little bit of a surprise to see that coloration coming out of the brake fluid, and that sludge. It almost seems like. Okay, get my hard to get all the things working together at the same time here. I don't have the reservoir in front of you, but that is coming out clear, and I expect that because all the flushing was done from the first one. So just a little bit on this, because effectively we're just doing the point between the T-fitting on the rear axle to this brake cylinder here. Okay. You can see as I got still dirty. So I'm going to close the valve, clear valve. I'm going to empty the reservoir again for the vacuum pump and do the same thing all over again. See if I can tighten my hand here first, which I think I can. Good. Okay, I'm going to go empty and start to flush it. Draw us a bit more for one last time. Okay, one last flush and just check the reservoir. Emptied the container for the vacuum pump. Cleaned it all out again. I topped up the reservoir in the master cylinder as well. I'm not having to put as much in every time because I'm taking less and less out, because most of the flushing, as I said, was the first side. I'll try to do this a little bit more carefully so that don't introduce any air. And I don't know if I'll be able to get this in so you can see it. A little more awkward on this side of the car. Put that down out of the way until I get a little bit in there. So right now, I think that's as far as I'm going to go because it is coming out clear. Well, I should say without any contamination in it. So I'm going to keep that vacuum on, see if I can snug down this. And again, bubbles here don't matter because it's really just leaking past the hose. Drum brakes are also a little bit more forgiving with bleeding. I think it's because the volumes are so much smaller as well. A little bit more travel than a disc, and a little bit less volumes. So just for so everybody can see. that I got out, so it doesn't maybe show up as well, but a lot more clear than the first time. Okay, gotta be careful around paint with brake fluid. It does take it off really effectively. So I'm having to sort of dance around two different areas. I'm just going to show you what I got. I'm trying to be a little bit careful to do this in front, but so there's the brake fluid now. See, it's a lot clearer. It actually looks golden color, which it should. Not the first bit that came up, which was black. So set that aside, not spilling the paint. And you can see reservoir levels just about perfect. I did when I was doing this a bit earlier, got a little bit overflow. So I'm going to very carefully wipe that area and wipe the reservoir cover, sorry, make sure I don't get any residue, brake fluid I should say, on the paint. Not particularly good paint in this car. Well, don't need to make any worse than it is. So that's all good. Had these paper towels wrapped around here while I was getting the last fitting, which is there. And you can see a bit of the final routing of the brake line. I was able to reuse the old brake line, so it's got a few little bends here and there, but overall not too bad. I probably could have cut it back shorter. I tend to not do that. So I have this relatively long loop out here, and don't really need to do that. But as far as the routing goes, I'm pretty happy with that. Looks like it got no leaks or anything. It falls a little bit more closely to the booster. Down along here, tight underneath there. And before it came, I believe, over here on this side. It's closer to this side of that electrical bulkhead fitting, came across and went into this side of the old master cylinder. So that is the right master cylinder for this application. I was looking at the service manual for this, and you know, it's been completely different. This is obviously because it's an aftermarket. If this was a manual, if it didn't have the booster, you'd have a rod that went from there to the actuator, just a rod with an eyelet in the end. With the booster, you have a plunger that goes from the master cylinder into the booster, and it's retained by a clip. But seeing as how this is a bit of a hybrid, that's why I wound up making my own little miniature or short plunger to work with this setup. So we're gonna give it a test drive, see how it works. My suspicion is that either the brake fluid got contaminated, and that's what caused it to turn black, or that real hard brake application I made that basically broke down the seal and overpowered the seal on the master cylinder. So I probably had pieces of the seal within the piston inside the master cylinder either fail or pieces of it break loose, and that black residue is probably those O-rings in there. I don't know if I'll take it apart. I may or may not. Don't really need to. Like I said, I didn't like that old master cylinder. That bigger, the pedal on this was hard as a rock, and I think it's because you had the 1/4 inch or so bore of the master cylinder compared to this 1 inch. So you know, if it's pressure applied to the wheel cylinders is force over area. So my foot applies the force, and that applies to a 1 inch cylinder, gives you, say for the sake of argument, 1 psi. But if this was, for instance, a larger, say for the sake of argument, it's a 2 inch master cylinder, now you have 1/2 psi. So you have to apply more force to get the same pressure applied to the slate or the wheel cylinders. So, but the advantage of a larger cylinder is volume. So that's why they're using disc brakes, because the pistons on disc brakes are much larger. So you have, so you have a bigger master cylinder piston, you have a bigger piston on your caliper, so you can afford it. But you can't do that on a drum brake. So I think this will correct it. We'll take a bit of a drive and see how it feels. But I think this should make the pedal effort a whole lot better. It's certainly going to take care of the fade I was getting. So clearly there was something wrong with that, the seals on that towards the rear brakes. But we'll see how that works, and I'll finish the video off with a bit of a driving report. Thanks. So for this job, I just want to also show you some of the tools I used as well. So a double flaring tool, they've got both the double flaring and the bubble. Bubble's more modern. This is old way of doing things. A couple of the wrenches made for pipe or tube fittings. This is important. It's so easy to round off these fittings. So you want to make sure you have a good grip. So I got these. I just got a real cheap tube bending tool. I've been looking at the ones where they have different size tube and the rest. This gets me by, but yeah, not very good. And for this small 3/16 tube, it was a little bit of a trick. And what I did to try to straighten the line out, I took this section out, and I actually have a little section of rail line that I use as an anvil basically, and that's how I straightened it out and bent it. I got work to do. I'm not sure if that's the final configuration for that line. I may wind up replacing it down the road. Anyways, we'll see how the brakes work. And then this little small tube cutting tool, that's important. Preparation of the tube's important as well. So not a whole lot to do this. I already showed you the little vacuum tool. Real handy when you're doing stuff by yourself, but real easy. I think the hardest part for this was making the little plunger to adapt this master cylinder to that replacement booster. And the only delay I ran into was getting the right fitting. I probably should have had these things on hand, but I went through what I did have in parts, and there was a little bit of an unusual one with the 1/2 20 thread and the master cylinder and the 3/16. So something I'll be picking up a few more in the future, but I don't do a lot of this anymore. Just don't deal with old rusty brake lines a whole lot anymore. At least when I do have that issue, I rip it all out, because it's going to be a problem anyways. Anyhow, next thing will be a bit of a test run to see how everything works. So I haven't gone far yet, but I can tell you initial impression. I just basically took it around out of the garage and put it around the driveway. Initial impression, the brake pedal feels a bit better. Not a whole lot, but it kind of makes sense. If the original brake was a 1 1/8, it's a square, so 1 versus 1 1/8, there's only really about 20% more pressure being applied to the brakes. If it's about a 1 1/4 inch cylinder in the master cylinder, then about a 40%. So it feels like it's not 40%. Feels still pretty firm. Definitely the fade's gone entirely, so that's fixed that problem. The only other thing I guess I get to say is that I probably need to go and bleed the front brakes, because I can feel that the back brakes are doing most of the work right now. You can usually tell because the front brakes, if they're working, the nose will dive a little bit. On braking, the nose pulls down, and I don't feel anything. It's pretty level at the front, so, and that's a change from what was before. So I cut a corner there, didn't bleed the front brakes, so I didn't think I lost much, but it looks like I need to do that as well. So I'll take care of that and try the road test then. Well, guys, I thought I'd bring you back. I've driven the Jeepster about 200 miles and everything's working great. And yeah, I do perceive more braking power now. So clearly that was too large of a master cylinder, and that was making the brake pedal really hard. Having to apply a lot more force to get good braking force. I've actually kind of pushed myself or thrown myself forward, surprisingly enough, a few times, which is pretty impressive for drum brakes. But everything's working good, no issues whatsoever, no leaks. Pretty straightforward job. You know, the only things you have to know is making sure that you thoroughly bleed the master cylinder, the lines, clear out the contaminants in the line. You know, the routing of the brakes, the brake lines was also a little of a thing to be thought out, but very straightforward work. It's a bolt-in change, other than fabricating, of course, the plunger to connect the new master cylinder to the old booster. Everything's working good. The only thing I can say is I do have a little bit of squeak coming from the front, probably from hard application of the brakes just to test them out. So I'll be taking a look at that. Suspect it's nothing, might just be the drum rubbing on the backing plate. But everything worked good. Nothing really to learn from this, or nothing really to point out that could have gone better. So thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks.